Welcome to a podcast provided by Humanity Education. Our topic is exploring data in our schools and in education as a broader industry. As a topic which everybody has some exposure to, it is worth taking the time to dive a little bit deeper. You can find out more about Humanity at humanity.com.au and feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn. It's important that we build the networks. I am joined today by the founder of Paideia Education, Mr. Dylan Chern. Thank you for the wave there, Dylan. That's always a nice way of greeting people. Dylan is starting his company over the last couple of years, and I've spent a fair bit of time with Dylan face to face, and I know him really well. But I'm just going to give him an opportunity just to introduce himself, and for the purpose of today's podcast. Over to you, Dylan.
My name is Dylan. I'm the founder of Paideia Education. And what we do is we try and really bridge the gap and supplement what we call the other half of education in high school. And so I think as a teacher, oftentimes you don't have the resources and time to kind of give every single student that individualized support that you want. And inevitably, like kids fall through the gaps, right? And so we do like kind of 3 hour kind of homework time study sessions, partner with schools to give that student that extra support and also have tutoring in there to kind of bridge that gap.
Love it. And it's really interesting because I know education wasn't your first calling, Dylan, and I now know that you are providing support to students in a number of schools that have adopted or formed a partnership with Paideia, and I have no doubt that's going to continue to do great things, and the students are the ones that are benefiting. That's what I love the most about it, I think. Before we dive into Paideia, I think it's really interesting just to talk about yourself. The fact that you went in a different direction, but also I've got some grey hairs creeping in up here, and every time they cut it shorter, the greys are not going away. It's devastating. You are a relatively recent graduate. How many years ago was it that you exited school?
I graduated in the first cohort of ATAR, so 2020.
The first cohort of ATAR, and also, and without going into the number, you actually did very, very well. So I know your ATAR was a really positive one, which gave you a variety of options to go wherever you wanted to study and do what you wanted to do. My first question, Dylan, really focuses on Dylan the student. I think it's so important that we consider the perspective of students in a data and education podcast series. There's great teachers talking about it, system leaders. There's great programs being developed. We've got an episode with Dr. Paul Browning. But you're a student. You're on the front line. You are in the classroom. So I'm really interested. Probably a two-part question. One, what was your exposure to data in terms of the education that you received? And also, what did that understanding of data do for you, especially in a brand new system like the ATAR, where it's called the new QC system, is what they actually wanted to call it. But with the ATAR, that was so new and something which you would have had to navigate as you were traveling through. Talk us a little bit through your time as a student.
I think as a student, especially since we were the first cohort of that new system, I don't remember being exposed to data in a very significant way. I'm sure there was like a bunch of data going on in the background. But coming from, like you said, the student perspective, I think data by itself for students doesn't really say anything. You're more likely to have a student look at kind of the numbers and say, that's cool, and then move on. And so I think for data to be used in a productive way when working with students, I'm not saying to inform like your decisions when you're working with your teachers and your head of departments and stuff like that, but to be used in a way that pushes students in a certain direction. I think you have to create an accompanying narrative around it for the students and give that students a why, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And it's interesting. I sit in this chair now and I've sat with students and gone through data, whether it was OP, whether it was ATAR, just talking through. And, I love the intricacies. I love that, the mark here is going to make this different. And I would get so excited about it. But then sometimes you're right. Students would walk in and they're like, cool.
Yeah.
And off they'd go. And it's really interesting. I mean, do you think data is something the students could grasp just that little bit more closely to their hearts to help steer their direction?
I think data used in a way that is made relevant to them through like a story is what is necessary. And so you have to give the students a why. I think that's a very kind of recurring narrative in my head around education is that I don't think students are given a why enough. And so, for example, if you were to use data on me or one of my peers, for example, to make me want to improve my grades, you'd have to say, this is the normal distribution of how much study a student puts in the week. And in the middle, if you do, let's say, 10 hours of study, you will get probably an 80 median ATAR. And then you can show that to students who are doing 8 hours of study and saying, you just need to do 10 more hours, 2 more hours of study a week to get that 80 median ATAR. And that's made more relevant and it creates a certain story and narrative around it that I think is much more powerful and gives students a why to look at the data. I don't think data, yeah, by itself means anything to students because I can look at the exact same normal distribution graph as a student and be like, that's cool. Um, Move on. I want to like play games. I want to hang with my friends, and so I think making it relevant to the student in their mind is my thoughts on kind of how to use data in that sense.
Nice. So when you were going through, just to put a bit of context around, I guess you personally, were you aiming for a particular type of ATAR? Were you expecting a particular score, or was it just a surprise on the day?
I think probably might sound a bit arrogant, but in my heart, I always kind of felt like I was going to get do well. But the reason why I think I was aiming for to maximize the amount of opportunities I would have coming out of high school, and so um, I didn't really think much about the ATAR I was trying to get. I more thought about kind of the effort I was putting in and the quality of the work I was putting out, and I thought the ATAR would follow.
Hmm. No, that's interesting, and it's good just to it really sort of personalizes the education career that you had. You sat down, just wanted to get the best you could get. So actually, the data was off to the side in some ways because you're like, I'm just going to give it everything, and I'm going to get the best I could possibly get, which is a real pure way of looking at education, I think, and I like that. Now, when you got your score, obviously, as I said, you did fantastic, and you had a number of options available to you. Yet there is a difference between where you went and what you're doing now with Padea. Do you just want to talk people through that sort of transition and change?
Yeah, sure. I guess it really starts with um, my childhood, to be honest. And so, as a kind of Asian background, both of my parents immigrants. I was very heavily, of course, pushed into medicine, and whenever people asked me to what I was going to do and what I wanted to do, I would say I wanted to be a doctor, businessman. And so I'd say I want to be a doctor, businessman. And so I think that kind of tells you that I actually wanted to be a businessman, and then doctor was just thrown in there. And so I think as I progressed in high school, I realized that the businessman was actually the more and more, I guess, pertinent part, and the doctor was probably more and more of my parents' wishes. And so, against the I guess expectations, I went into a degree called the Bachelor of Advanced Finance and Economics because I thought finance was probably a very useful skill for starting your own business. And I think kind of going into uni, we all eventually get indoctrinated by recruitment and stuff like that. And I don't know, I forgot my dream a bit, I think. And so I ended up going down to Melbourne and doing an investment banking internship, among other things before that got me to that point. And when I was down there, I thought it was kind of a real inflection point because I realized I actually hate this. And a really great piece of advice I was told in choosing your career is look at the person who is at the top of your field, so your director, your managing director, and say, is his life something I want for myself? And the answer in all regards was no. And not to say they didn't have a bad life. I think one of my directors was earning like $1 million a year. One of them was earning like 600K. They had like beautiful families. But I think it just wasn't for me. And being very kind of, I guess, vulnerable, I was like, I thought that if I stayed on this career path in 10 years, I wasn't sure whether I'd actually like, be alive. And that's, I guess, the case. And so I came back to Brisbane and I was in a bit of a what do I do with my life, right? I have 2 more years of my uni degree. The thing I thought I was going to do for the next 30 years was not it. And I think it really brought me back to my roots and made me think, look, I've always wanted to be a business owner, or like do business, entrepreneurship. I'm never going to get any younger, and I'm also never going to have less responsibility. And why don't I just take a punt right now, right? And so, what is my expertise? Because I think a lot of people will say I can start a business, but you really need to be an expert in your field to start a business. I think you can't just start a business in farming. Like there are people with 50 years of farming experience. So um, I did well in ATAR, as you said, and luckily, I was the first graduate at ATAR, and and I also did a fair bit of tutoring in my time. And I think there's a lot of gaps in tutoring. I think tutoring is a field that hasn't been innovated upon in like since its birth, right? You have one tutor, another student, they come together, show me how to do it, and it hasn't really changed um, forever. And all the companies in the tutoring field are just middlemen. They just link the tutor to the student, and that's it. And then they put a ridiculous margin on it. And what value are they actually creating for the student, for the parent, for the tutor as well? Because the tutor also gets that margin is taken off their salary after they've done a lot of hard work, a lot of effort into getting that amazing grade. And so I thought that was a field that I could come into and try and make a difference in. And at the beginning, it was more motivated by, I guess, pain, but I think now it's much more motivated by mission.
That's wonderful. I mean, that in itself, Dylan, is a great story. And for anybody who's able to take the time to listen or watch, first of all, I appreciate you being so honest about it and that need. But sounds like a calling. Sounds like something. The business was there, and you identified your strengths, and you quite quickly moved past the business money paying side of things into actually let's do this really well. And I think that's what sets some people apart. And then even with my exposure to Padea, that's what sets Padea apart compared to just the links and the sort of the connections that external companies are providing. So I think that's wonderful. I suppose with a podcast focusing on data and education, what's Padea's approach to using data to inform the work that it does?
Yeah, sure. So data obviously helps us inform decisions. The metrics we use are actually very simple. And so we track churn, net promoter score, and then a product market fit survey. And so what that is kind of we survey our students saying, would you be, if we were no longer accessible to you, would you be disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or very disappointed? And if you get 40% of people saying kind of very disappointed after minusing off the not disappointed, that means you have good product market fit. And we track that as an indicator for all the changes that we make in our program. And so if we, for example, improve the communication between parents, like sending progress reports and stuff like that, do we see these metrics going down or do we see them going up? Whenever we see them going down, we double down and then kind of double down on that innovation. And we're always testing. And so between our schools, we're testing every single session, something new, every single term, broadly, something new. And we're always looking to see if it goes up or goes down. And I think something we do with data is that when we collect it, we always prioritize like intuition and anecdotal things before data. And so I think one of the beauties of having a startup is that you're so close to your customer, you can do things that don't scale. And so in the context, I would rather have kind of 15-minute like one-on-one interviews with 5 students or 5 parents very intimately than have a full 200 student like data collection round. And so I think we prioritize anecdotal data, like anecdotal things first, and then we look to the data to see if it supports it.
That's yeah, that's really interesting. And what without spoiling some of the other podcasts that I've already recorded before this one, it's really interesting how even when we're talking about numbers, we're talking about data, which we're informing evidence-based, evidence-informed practice, all the different terms. The intuition, the character, the sense of person or individual that comes to any given conversation has absolutely shone through. So and regardless of, even when you bring it back to, let's talk about the base numeracy scores in that plan, it is always coming back to, well, that's the score, that's great, let's talk about how that's going to help that individual. And that's that personalized approach to education. Is personalized education or personalized approach something the PDEA is actively verbalizing, or is it something that just happens naturally by the very nature of you as a person?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things we actually do in terms of the personal thing is that we pick one student per day of the week, per term, per school. And so, if we have so we have maybe like four of these families, and we say we want to customize the program exactly for you. And so, how do we make the program perfect for you? And we're gonna give you a discount on it. We're on the program. We're going to have a survey every week with you, and we're going to try and make it fit for your student and your family exactly. And so we'll take any personal requests, anything from the student, and we'll try and modify it for them. And what that gets you, I think, is that if it's perfect for one student, it can be perfect for many other students. And you also learn kind of their pain points and what to go off. And once you've done that very individualized, personalized kind of data collection and scouting, you can then see if it applies to the rest of your client base. And so this parent has this problem. What do you think about this? We made this change. And a really good advice I've heard is to never ask your customer for the solution to their problem, because if they knew the solution, they wouldn't have it. They wouldn't have the problem, right? And so we never ask hypotheticals like, would you like it if we sent emails to you every single day? Because they don't know. We more ask, what problem do you have? And the problem is, oh, I don't get enough communication. And then you test the email every day and see if they like it. And that's the, I guess, way we approach personalizing our service.
Yeah, right. As a quick tangent there,
Hmm.
what's one of the craziest things that a student has asked you to
Craziest
do
thing.
as part of their personalized education?
Yeah, you can't take everything at first face value. And so I always have students, because we provide dinner at a session, so they're 3 hours long, and then we have a dinner break in between. And I always have students kind of, can we have KFC? And, can you bring like a water fountain, like a soda fountain, or can we please have ice cream? And then the answer is obviously no. You can't have KFC every single day for dinner, and you can't have ice cream. But I think some problems are better left unsolved.
Well, look, at least they've had their moment, right? They've had agency, they've had voice. But if they're saying it with a smile on their face and the tongue in their cheek, I guess I guess you've got a rough idea that they're just playing around. Look, a question which I would imagine you've been asked as a former principal. My question I would ask anybody who is looking to help, albeit with the best of intentions, I'd have to ask: how do you know the PDEA is working? How do you know that it's doing what you wanted it to do?
Yeah, sure. I think one thing is with churn, when customers are coming back, that's how you know that it's going well. I think another thing is when it's growing by word of mouth. And so at one of our schools, John Paul College, we started with 20 students in our first term at our pilot, and we grew to over 70 in less than 2 terms. And
Wow.
the only kind of communication we had was, this is our program. It's all sent through the school. So it's just a flyer, and that's just once per term. And I don't think through a pure flyer you can get like 3x growth. And so when you're growing exponentially, that means one people are telling two people are telling four, and that's how I know that's growing. Another thing is when collect um, it's quite hard to collect data on whether grades are actually improving as a tutoring service, because we don't have access to that information like a school does, right? And so just asking getting parent and student feedback at the end of the term. So we call every single parent saying, how did their grades go? Are they improving? And we get surveys on that, and also talking to students as well. And that's kind of how we know how we're going.
That you raise a really interesting point there. It actually sounds like an amazing opportunity in some ways. You talk about grades, and the schools have got them. Do you think there's an appetite in schools to share that data with a company like Padea to support the work that they're doing?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something in question. I think when you get into these details of schools, though, I think um, I've found firsthand that it can be quite compliance heavy, and so I'm sure there will be questions about privacy and questions about like intellectual property protection and kind of stuff like that. And so those are the questions I'll be having. But if that was possible, and I'd definitely bring it up, that would be amazing to kind of coordinate.
Yeah, look, it sounds exciting. You're right, though. I can imagine the compliance
Yeah.
around it, and also where does a school stop and Padea start? So I think it's really important. Maybe distance allows you to focus on the things that you want to focus, which I suppose brings me to a question. What matters? Is it about getting the students the best ATAR? Is it about teaching them the study skills for success in life? Is it about being a person, which is providing probably a degree of companionship along the education and study journey? Or what do you think really shines through in the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really a mix of everything. And so, um, like we discussed on the teacher's end, it's very difficult to. You have 30 students, five classes, 150 students total. How do you keep everyone on the same page and keep, like, for example, Sam in one of your classes in one of your lessons on the unit circle, and he doesn't like you don't know, and so it's kind of bridging for the teacher that gap where we can keep everyone on board because we have tutors. Like if there's five students, we'll have one tutor, and so there's 40 students in one classroom, we'll have eight tutors. With that ratio, it's much easier to kind of say, hey, what parts of the lesson did you not understand or were you not paying attention to, that is going to kind of hold you back for the rest of the session or the rest of the program, right? Because if you don't understand some concepts, you can't understand the whole curriculum. And so we try and, from the teacher standpoint, push that back up. And that's the tutoring side of the program. And also, I think if you were to imagine some of your students, how many of them could benefit from an extra 3 hours of study a week? How many of them would have like such a drastic improvement in their grades if they just studied how to focus 3 extra hours a week on study? I think that number would be huge. And I think it seems to me in education, the solutions can get quite technical and it can be a lot to do with like software and can be a lot to do with like what kind of programs we use. But I think we try and go the opposite way and try and make it as simple as possible. And so if your kid was to do 3 hours more study a week with the support they could have, how much more improvement could they see in their results? And so that's, I guess, the academic side, and it's what the teachers and parents want to hear. From the student side, it's a lot of the time they come into the sessions and they come in for support or they come in for the dinner or they come in to be with their friends and they realize that the tutors are not only there to support them, they're almost mentors and they're almost counselors. And so I think we can say as, because all of our tutors are ATAR graduates and all of them are similar age, we can say things that teachers can't say. So for example, I didn't like math too. The reason why you're doing it is because you can get the right grade to get into the degree you want. You can have like a much more real relationship. And what they find is that a lot of the students end up looking to the tutors as mentors. And so there's like, this guy looks like me, he looks similar to me. He's not that different in terms of, I guess, intelligence and stuff like that. We have the same interests, but he's done what I thought I might not have been able to do, or he's done what I thought like what I want to do. And so, and he also tells me how I can get there. And so it's kind of that really personal mentorship that creates a real sense of, I guess, academic camaraderie is what we're trying to foster in the program. It's that culture we're trying to build because we're all in it together. You can get support from whoever you want. They've been where you are. They know how to get there. They know how you're feeling. And we're just here to support you and give you that kind of time to study. And yeah.
It's really interesting, Dylan, because as you're talking, it's hard as I guess as somebody who works in education, well, has for my entire life and career. A lot of what you're saying is so different to what we see in education at the moment. You know, we're struggling. I don't suppose you want to be a teacher because there's a shortage. I mean, you're doing a great job. So if the business size, when you get old and grey and they no longer look at you like one of those cool people that you were just talking about, maybe just jump into a course, do a little conversion, and get into the classroom and see how you go. But the point that you're making there about, you talk about multiple tutors, you're talking about really focusing, you're talking about teachers using data. I would use data to understand where all the 30 people in my class would be. But you are right, one person catering for all. You know, when one person really wants to cater for all those different points, that is exhausting. It's actually unsustainable as a methodology. But yet, people will just continue to do it and do it and do it until they can do it no longer. So it's really interesting. And I sit here because you're not a teacher, but you are relatively new to this world of education and coming through it. And perhaps there's incredible wisdom in the points that you're sharing and the model that you're rolling out with Padea, which could influence education on a broader scale. I'd love to think that, you know, if I was sitting down looking at the same data, because I do love data, I was sitting down looking through, and then we had a team of people going into a room. I mean, wow, what a difference we could make. It's all comes down to dollars, I suppose, dollars and bodies, isn't it? That's the challenge behind it. But you know, sometimes we've got to make a decision where does it all form. Now, in one of the other podcasts, there's a viewpoint expressed which I accept. You know, the ATAR has one purpose. That is to organize the ranks to get into university courses. Um, Unfortunately, it's not just that. It's viewed for league tables, schools' success is measured upon it, etc. Do you have any, I guess, perspective or even experience in ATAR and how it's used?
Yeah, yeah. That's a very interesting question. I think I think high schoolers aren't stupid. Um, all of my peers, when I was going through grade 12, were very aware of the fact that we're going through like part of a system, that the chemistry methods, specialist content that we're learning, for example, imaginary numbers, were not going to be used for us in the future. Um, and it was simply that we were there to get the highest result possible to get into the degree that we wanted. And I think again, and then even the same trend follows in uni, and it's like, okay, now I've got into the degree I wanted. I need to get the GPA that I need to have, and I need to have the work experience that I need to collect to get into the job I need to do. And I'm sure after you get into the lesson goes, I need to put in the contribution I need to have to get the promotion that I need to have. I want.
Spot on.
All right, and so I think I think that's also part of the reason why so many students are saying stuff like, "Oh, I wish I learned how to do taxes in high school," and that's everyone's favorite example, right? But once you're an adult, like taxes are the most boring. Like, who wants to do taxes? Yeah, and I don't think students actually want to learn tax. I think they want to have a more concrete reason of like why we're doing it. Because tax is such a good example. Like, oh, we have to do tax, and so I should learn to do tax. And I think what was slipping, I guess, or what was missing in the ATAR system is a concrete why of like why am I doing this? Um, because a lot of the students, like I was lucky because I knew that I wanted to do something in finance, and I knew that I wanted to kind of have the most opportunity into the most amount of degrees. A lot of students don't have that thought. A lot of students have don't even think about what's after high school, or if they do, it's like an afterthought. And so how can you expect a student to want to excel academically or put in the effort or learn when there isn't an end like why point? And I think that question needs to be answered more for those students. And
That's that's lovely, and I mean you've come back to that quite a lot today in terms of the why. You know, it is something which really drives you, and I suppose you know why. Why, if you've got the education data, why are you looking at it? Why is it important? And then what are you going to do with it? And what you're going to do with it, again, probably has to be informed by the individual's why. Because this person wants to get into this course, or this person wants to be able to do this. And and again, as somebody who's non-education, you're talking about reviewing curriculum versus knowledge and content, and actually focusing a little bit more on knowledge utilization and skills for life to be successful. So you're actually touching on some of the concepts that I think an increasing percentage of teachers or educators would be talking about as they're sort of moving forward.
Exactly, and I think something that I've a trend that I picked up as I've gone through, I guess, my short amount of life is that I think difficulty corresponds with lessons learned, and so if you wanted to create like a patient person, um, you wouldn't give things to them immediately, and if you wanted to create a resilient person, you'd put them through a lot of hardship, and so I just recently went to a future of education summit, and I think a lot of the discussion I was hearing is how do we make things easier for the students? Like how do we kind of um, make how do we make like for example understand like for example like tax lessons, like how to do tax more accessible to students so they can learn these things. And I wonder if the root cause of what you're trying to do, because you can learn tax in like an hour by yourself if you really wanted to, as like a personal tax return. Um, like, is it better to put them through the difficulty of being resourceful and learning how to figure it out yourself, or is it better to just hand them the lesson of this is how you do tax? Because education, I think, you can't teach everything that they're ever going to have to learn, right? And so is it better to teach them the skills to learn what they need to learn? Would be maybe my thought.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and I love that. I'm quite moved by you want to make somebody resilient, you give them challenge. You want to make somebody patient, you make them wait. Like that's a really beautiful way of explaining what a skills based education could look like, or perhaps a character based education. So you got to understand it, yes. You got to go through the content, yes, but then actually, you don't just kick a field goal, right? You got to practice and practice and practice, and an experience is a wonderful thing. But Dylan, credit to you, and it's important I say it. You're a young person who you're actually representing some phenomenal ideas there, which I would suggest would traditionally come from somebody with more experience. So even in yourself, there's probably a slight challenge to the points that you're making, because you're a young person who's saying these things, and you get it so quick, whereas other people probably would need another 10, 15 years of going through a process to get it. So credit to you on where that lands. I think just one other thing I just wanted to quickly touch upon, because you said it, and it hurt me, but you're right, I agree with you, but it hurt me. And you talk about kids sitting in, and I'm going to pick the top ones: chemistry, methods, specialist, physics. Engineering is up there now, and economics, actually, one of the highest scaling subjects in Queensland. Phenomenal subject, by the way, love it. Um, but actually, when they're sitting there and they're studying it, there is an acceptance among students that actually the content of that subject means nothing, is not going to serve any purpose later in life. You wanted to go into finance, so when you were doing chemistry, which would have all sorts of crazy equations, I would assume, not a chemist, that's hard. That's hard for a teacher, for a leader of a school. They would look at the curriculum and look at the offering. Isn't it unfortunate? Isn't it unfortunate that you've got to go through this 2, in some cases 3-year period of not interest, not engaging, not real, in order to get to where you wanted to go? And I guess I kind of I knew that I knew it, but just to hear somebody recently out who's gone through that transition articulate it, I think is really, really powerful.
And but I can definitely empathize of why it exists though, because I also can't think of a way you would do it differently, right?
Well, that's your next task, Dylan. Just do that next.
Yeah.
If you could just do that next,
Yeah.
get Badea into like 20 schools, the money's ticking in, and then all of a sudden,
You should change
fix
your curriculum
education,
list.
Dylan. What we're going to need minds like yours. That's what we're going to need. Remember those grey hairs? No, no, no. We need minds like yours. That's that might be part of your next calling. You never know. Last question from me, Dylan. Just because it's part of a podcast series which is focusing on data,
Yeah.
and it's amazing how data always takes us down these different avenues. I'm going to ask you straight up. I'm going to say data in education. Why is it a good thing? Why is it important? Why do we need it?
I think the reason why it's important is because it's it forms the basis, I think, of your decision making. And if you don't have data, everything else is just emotional and anecdotal, right? And so, um, I thought this framework of using data was really great, which is make a decision on intuition after gathering and studying a lot of data. And so try and collect as much data as you can and immerse yourself in that data. And but when you need to make that decision, make it with your heart. And so I think when the data and anecdotes disagree, I think the anecdotes are usually right. And so that doesn't mean like go slavishly follow what you think and your heart and stuff like that. But when the data usually disagrees, I think I've found that it's normally being miscollected or you're not measuring the right thing, and so it makes you kind of go back and try and relook at the data and recollect. And so I think data serves as the evidence towards your hypothesis. And I think if you don't have evidence towards your hypothesis, how can you kind of make any decisions, right? And so a really great
You know
example.
that sounds like a chemist, right? That sounds like a
Yeah.
chemist sentence. So just saying.
Yeah, not too far removed from high school to be getting and but yeah, and I think there was this really great example by I guess to bring business into education by I think you can tell I really like Jeff Bezos. But so, for example, in one of his board meetings, he was talking to his customer success manager, and he was saying like, how are the response times going on the complaints? And they're like, oh, it's really great. It's like 10 seconds and we pick up, and that was what the data was saying, right? And Jeff was like, okay, let's test that. And during the middle of the board meeting, or like the executive meeting, he calls customer success, and it's like $1, $2, we'll put you on hold. And then it goes 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then someone finally picks up the phone, and the customer success guy is obviously all red. Jeff tells him to get the hell out of my office. And but I think that shows that I think he's been hearing that customer success is probably not doing that well. And so I think you use anecdotes first, and then the data supports your, I guess, what you're thinking. And I think those two in tandem, but prioritized correctly, serves the foundation of making all your decisions. And at the highest level, strategically, your job as a, I guess, leader is quite simply just making decisions, right, all day. And so I think that's where it fits in.
Well, Dylan, it has been incredible speaking to you today. I think your perspective is unique. I think it is crucial. I know we do something called a next step survey. So when students leave, you've got to fill a little survey online to see where they're going. But after that, we've probably got a bit of work to do in Australia regarding alumni and sort of bringing people back to actually instigate change as opposed to just keep them connected. And I think anybody who listens to you speak today will think, "Wow, there's a really insightful young man." And I don't intend to be patronising saying that.
No,
I think you've got something pretty special there, buddy. And I look forward to seeing you share it. I look forward to seeing Padea grow and get into more and more schools. You are contactable through LinkedIn. You're an advocate for networking and sharing your thinking, and I commend you for doing so, buddy.
no, very kind words. Thank you, Richard.
I'm full of kind words, man. That's all. Just a kind person. That's
Just
what
the
it is.
kind words.
Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching or listening. A podcast provided by Humanity Education, humanity.com.au, and then Dylan Chern, the founder of Padea Education. If anything he has said is of interest and relevance, which it well should be, I encourage you to look him up. Principals, make contact with him. And I would like to think those headline statistics, as dangerous as they might be, I'd like to think they're going to see an uptake. Thank you very much, everybody. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.